Yeah. Excellent. Okay, good evening, everyone. Good evening to all those on Zoom also. So I wanted this week to look at a detail, a nuance in the text of the Sefer Torah when it describes the encounter between Yaakov and Esav. And I think it's a nuance that brings out a number of interesting features. Intersection between how different schools of thought look at the same text. So the background to this story is Yaakov is returning after having been away for more than 2 decades with Lavan, and he's returning to Eretz Yisrael, and he is informed that Esav, his long-lost brother, is coming to meet him, and Abba Moyos Ishimoi, there's 400 people with Esav, and Yaakov is famously very worried about this encounter. We'll see later the psukim that describe Yaakov's preparation for this encounter. He davens to Hashem, he makes preparations to split his camp, he sends gifts to Esav, but he's very nervous about this encounter, very worried about it, and eventually he meets Esav, and surprisingly the meeting goes well. It's actually a good meeting. VaYishlach Yaakov Einov. So this is the top. This is in VaYishlach and Gimel. Yaakov lifts up his eyes. Vayav in Esav bar. I think I didn't number the sources. I apologize. I'll for those who don't have the sources, I'm going to actually put the link again in the chat function. And for those who are will watch it on YouTube, I'll paste it in the description also below. I'll just put the link there for those of you can click on the link and you can see the sources. VaYishlach Yaakov Einov. Yaakov lifted up his eyes. Vayav in Esav bar. Esav is coming. The Imoi Abba Meus Ish, he has 400 people with him, and he splits the camp. That's Pasuk Aleph, Pasuk Beis, Pasuk Dalad. What actually happens when they encounter each other? Vayorotz Esav Likrosoi. Esav runs to greet him. Rechabkehu, he hugs him. Vayipol al Tavaro, he falls on his neck. Vayishakehu Vayivku, and he kisses him, and they weep, they cry. So the encounter goes very nicely, very well. Ostensibly, in the simplest reading of the Psukim, for some reason or other, Yaakov's had a complete turnaround. Esav's had a complete turnaround. The hatred that marred their youth, the whole tension with the taking of the brachas, Esav wanting to kill Yaakov, all of this is, thank God, behind them, and the encounter goes very well. They hug and kiss. What could be more natural? 2 brothers meet each other after many years apart. That's what you would expect. Now, there is an unusual textual feature on the words which I put in bold in the handouts, Vayishakehu, and he kissed him in the English, in that it has dots on top of each letter. So if you look in the text in the Sefer Torah, on top of, in the handout, I wasn't able to get my font to print dots on top of the letters. If you look in the Sefer Torah, on top of Vayishakehu, on top of each letter are dots. And this is an unusual feature. I think there's 10 times in the Torah where we have this feature of dots on top of letters, and each time it's spoken about, it's discussed what this feature is about. There's a number of a famous example in Devarim. There's a number of examples where we find dots on top of letters, and every time there's lots of discussion about what this is for. And I see a few more people have going to let us paste the handout again on the chat function for those who haven't had the handout. This week it's particularly important to follow inside. So what are these dots on top of the letters about? So as I mentioned, this isn't the only time that the dots appear, and there's basically 2 approaches to these dots. One approach is a Midrashic approach, in which the dots are coming to teach us something, some extra nuance or layer of meaning, and therefore the dots are put there to say something or to signify something. What are they signifying? We'll see shortly. Either they are removing something from the text, or they are emphasizing something in the text. I'm going to have to work out which one they are doing. By the way, this is a common and well-known feature in many manuscripts, in which if you want to, nowadays we're used to conventions as to how we indicate that we either wish to delete something or emphasize it. We may put it in bold, we may put a strike through the letters, we may put it in a fainter font, we may underline it. We have conventions, that's how we indicate that. So in the Torah, this is an indication of words either being emphasized or somewhat being deleted. That's agreed upon by everyone. But what's going on? Why is this word being emphasized or deleted? So the Midrashic approach is it's coming to teach us some extra nuance or layer of meaning, and we'll look at that later. There is another approach which is mentioned by the Rishonim, and it's really built on a semi-Mishnaic source called Ovis Rabbi Nosson. So we're familiar with Pirkei Avos, which is a Masechta in Shishal Sidri Mishnah. It's a Talmudic source. It's a source from the Mishnah. There are other early works which are collections of statements of Chazal, many of which are brises. They didn't enter into the text of the Mishnah. And one such work is Ovis Rabbi Nosson. It takes a similar structure or theme to Maseches Avos, to Pirkei Avos, but instead of, but has extra information in it and slightly differs. Now, there is a chapter in Pirkei Avos in which it lists lots of tens, like 10 generations between Odom and Noach, 10 generations between Noach and Avram, 10 Mamoros, 10 statements that Hashem used to create the world and so on. And in this Mishnah, or semi-Mishnah, this price of Ovis Rabbi Nosson, it lists the 10 places where texts are dotted, where letters are dotted in the Sefer Torah, and it discusses these 10 places. And if you read Ovis Rabbi Nosson, if you read this source, and I also printed a source from the Das Zakenim Mivali Tosfos, who says a similar thing, they seem to indicate that these dots were put in by Ezra HaSofer. These dots were put in by Ezra. Why were they added by Ezra? It seems to indicate that Ezra was somewhat unsure exactly what to make of this text, and he added these dots in to indicate that lack of certainty. So this is the source which has, this is the Ovis Rabbi Nosson, and this is what the Das Zakenim and Bali Tosfos seems to indicate. Now, it's not clear exactly what these sources mean. We'll have a look at the Das Zakenim and Bali Tosfos inside. Before that, I should have mentioned that this shiur has been dedicated Le'ilo Nishmas Tamma bas Tzvi Aryeh Hacohen, whose Yahrzeit is tonight. And I apologize that I didn't mention that at the beginning of the shiur, but the shiur has been dedicated to Le'ilo Nishmasa in her memory. And thank you very much to our donor and for sponsoring the shiur tonight in her memory. Now, if we look at the Das Zakenim inside, he speaks about this. He says, so he brings a brisa, again, an early source, which speaks about this, which discusses the concept of these dots. And at the end of this source, he says that these dots are like a machak, like an erasion, which Ezra put in, and indicates that this is because Ezra wasn't sure whether this text should be included or not. So these sources tie in perhaps to a Gemara in another brisa in Maseches Sofrim, in which a statement is brought from Rav Shimon ben Lakish, in which it says there was doubts about words here or there in the text of the Sefer Torah, and Ezra HaSofer resolved those and perhaps indicated where he was unsure about the text by putting dots on top of these letters. So before I go further, I want to mention that really this is a topic in its own right. We are dealing here with Ikrei Emunah, with the validity of the text of the Sefer Torah, and therefore it really needs proper exploration. It's not something to be rushed through. But certainly there were schools of thought in the in some of the brises that I've mentioned, and amongst some of the Rishonim, that there are odd letters here or there where there is some doubt as to the correct text. We are familiar with, even nowadays, there are slight differences between the text of the Sifrei Torah and the Masorah of the Sfardim, and the text of the Sifrei Torah and the Masorah of the Ashkenazim. And these indicate very early discrepancies in text, very minor, not significant ones, the odd letter here or there, which are indicated by Ezra HaSofer with this dot as a marking. That's one way of reading these sources. Another way of reading these sources may be that Ezra HaSofer was unsure as to interpretation, and that's why he's adding these dots. So in brief, just to summarize, we have sources, early sources that speak about these dots and as having been put in there to indicate either emphasis or removal of letters. The Midrashim understand that these dots are put in for adding extra nuance and interpretation of the Pesukim, but we have sources both in the Bali Tosfos and in the Brisas, in these early Talmudic sources that aren't included in the Mishnayos, which indicate that this might be to do with different texts that Ezra had and his way of resolving these texts. I should mention, I probably should have said this when I said it, the Bali Tosfos as a source. We're familiar with Tosfos written on the sides of the Gemara. The grandchildren and students of Rashi wrote a very extensive analytical commentary on the Gemara, which we know as Tosfos. They also wrote Peshat and Midrashic interpretations of the Psukim, which we have collected as various collections of commentaries of the Bali Tosfos. And here, this particular point of the Bali Tosfos, which are printed in the source sheet, is found on the Pasuk in Devarim of the Hanistros Hashem Elokeinu, a very famous Pasuk in Devarim, where there's also dots found above the letters. I'm not going to go into the context of that section of Psukim, but they say the explanation of these dots are to indicate that Ezra added them due to some lack of clarity in the Psukim, either in the interpretation or the correct text of the verse. So what we've said so far is that these dots feature in the Torah. They feature on this word VaYishlach, that's Yosef, that's Esav kissed Yaakov. And one way of understanding these are to do with the text as perhaps Ezra found it. However, there's a very strong school of thought found in the Midrashim that say that the purpose of these dots are to indicate nuance and layers of the meaning of the meaning of the Psukim. And here I want to look at the Bereshis Rabbah, which I printed as the third source on the first page. I see I forgot to number the sources here, so I'll simply call it the third source on the first page. And this was an example of Psukim, which of Midrashim. I could have printed any number of them which take a similar theme. So let's have a look at this Midrash inside. Vayoratz Esav the crosser. Esav runs to reach Yaakov, to greet Yaakov, I'm sorry. Vayishlach, and he kisses him. Nokut Olav, it's dotted on this word. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, says Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, we're now going to work out, are dots coming to emphasize or to remove? Whenever the words are more than the dots, in other words, you have more letters undotted than dotted, then the words are significant and the dots are less significant. But when the dots are more than the lettering, then look at the letters which are dotted and ignore the letters which are undotted. So if you have more dots, then the dotted letters are the ones emphasized and the undotted ones are the ones that you ignore. If you have more undotted, then the undotted ones are the ones emphasized. This is the rule he says. Here, however, this is what's important for our purposes. All the letters are dotted. So there's no one that has more than the other. So the first explanation the Midrash says, the explanation of Rabbi Shimon and Elazar, is that the dots are coming to emphasize the kiss is a real kiss. When Esav kisses Yaakov, this is a sincere and real kiss. He says Rabbi Yana in response, why are the dots there? He didn't come to kiss him, but to bite him. So this is a pun almost on the word lenashek, to kiss, lenashek, to bite, two very similar sounding words. We're going to have to see what to make of this Midrash, a very difficult Midrash to understand. But the dots are indicating that the kiss is not a real kiss. It's really a bite. It ends up as a kiss. How does it end up as a kiss? Nasa tzavoro shel avinu Yaakov, our father Yaakov's neck becomes shel shayish, it becomes marble, becomes very hard. The keyu shinol shel Rasha, and the teeth of that wicked man Esav become blunted. And therefore, he's unable to bite his neck, so he ends up kissing his neck. And now we understand the continuation of the pasuk. Tamad loma vayivku. Now we understand why the pasuk says they both cried. One is crying over his neck. He's unhappy that his neck has turned into marble. And one of them is crying over their teeth because their teeth have broken, have been blunted because of this attempted bite that went wrong. So we'll have to understand this Midrash more fully. But basically what the Midrash is saying is the following conversation. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says that the dots above the kiss are to indicate that the kiss is genuine. I would have thought this is a fake kiss. Therefore the Torah emphasized, no, he really did kiss him. Rabbi Yana says the opposite. Well, I don't need dots to tell me to take the pasuk seriously. Without dots, you take the pasuk seriously. Of course you take the pasuk seriously. Why wouldn't you take it seriously? That's what the pasuk says. Why do you need the dots to tell you to believe the Vayalashakeu that you kissed him? It must be the dots are telling you that the kiss was fake, the opposite. It was a fake kiss, and then he explains, what do you mean it was a fake kiss? Because he attempted to bite, but ends up as a kiss. because of this miracle of the neck turning into marble, and therefore he was unable to bite him, and therefore they both weep, they both cry over this event occurring. So what are we meant to make of all of this? Where do we go with this medrash, and how are we meant to understand it? So first of all, in understanding the machlokas between the two sources, let's turn to Rashi. So Rashi actually brings a slightly different version of the medrash. It's printed at the top of page 2 in the source sheet. Vayichabkehu, says Rashi at the top of page 2. Vayichabkehu, he hugged him. Rashi takes that seriously. Nisgalgulu Rachamov, Esav's mercy was aroused, his compassion was moved. When he saw Yaakov bowing down all these bows. So Rashi takes the hug seriously. Esav is moved, but what moves Esav is Yaakov bowing down. In other words, what Esav is really saying is, if you subjugate yourself to me, then I'm okay with you. As long as you submit, and I see that you're willing to bow. I see that you're willing to be subservient. You're willing to do a little bit of groveling. Then I'm willing to give you a kiss. Then everything is okay. So that's the first comment Rashi makes. Now Rashi picks up on VaYishlach, the kiss. Nokud olav. It's their dots over the word. We've mentioned this. He brings another Midrashic source. A Sifri, there's an argument about it. Some interpret it to mean that he didn't kiss him with his whole heart. So the top of page 2, there's the English also. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says no. Halacha it's a halacha. It's known that Esav hates Yaakov. At that moment, his compassion was moved, and he kissed him wholeheartedly. So Rashi here is adding 2 nuances to the medrash, or he's quoting the medrash. It's a different medrash. He's quoting it with a difference. He brings the same argument. Is the kiss genuine or not genuine? But he doesn't say in the reading that the kiss is non-genuine, that the kiss was really a bite. He's not willing to read that shut in the pasuk. It's not the simplest reading. It's not a reasonable reading. He says, of course, it's a kiss. The pasuk says it was a kiss. The pasuk says he kissed him. He kissed him. But it wasn't b'chol libo. It wasn't wholeheartedly. It wasn't sincere. By the way, b'chol libo doesn't necessarily mean it's completely hypocritical either. You can kiss someone without kol libo because you're a hypocrite. You're just flattering the recipient of the kiss, and really there's no love there at all. Or you can kiss someone where it's not b'chol libo, where there is something. They're still brothers after all. It's not wholehearted because there's a lot of anger and hate also there in Esav's thoughts and feelings towards Yaakov. So Rashi says it, the version in which the dots are emphasizing the non-sincerity of the kiss, Rashi nuances. It's not that it was a bite. It wasn't a kiss full of hate. It's a kiss, but it's not b'chol libo. It's not completely wholehearted. And that Rashi believes is pshat, more pshat. That's why he quotes this medrash in that form. The second explanation, though, how does it answer the question of the dots? It says, no, it's to teach us that dots are genuine. Asked Rabbi Yana in the previous medrash, why do you need dots to tell you it's genuine? I mean, if the pasuk says he kissed, he kissed. The answer says the medrash that Rashi quotes, it's because we would have assumed it's fake. Because it's a well-known fact that Esav hates Yaakov. I mean, that's been the whole theme of the story that's gone through. Therefore, this is a premise of the story. It's an assumption. It's the sort of the framework within which the story operates, that Esav is a Yaakov hater. If Esav is a Yaakov hater, then the simplest reading of the pasuk would be to read this kiss as a fake. Therefore, we need the dots to tell us that it's genuine. So basically, the machlokas in the medrash between the 2 readings of these dots, or one reading says, you read he kissed him, the default setting is take that seriously. He kissed him, the dots must be coming to tell us it's fake. The other reading says, no, the default setting is to consider it fake, because we know who we're dealing with. We know what Yaakov is. The dots must be coming to tell us that it's sincere. So the dots are coming to shift the meaning of the pasuk. We're just not clear what's the starting point. As the starting point, we would read the pasuk literally, and therefore the dots must be telling us that this is insincere. Was the starting point that we would read the kiss as fake because we know what Esav is, and therefore the dots are coming to us to tell us it's sincere. Hence the title of the shiur, a complete turnaround or a dotty revolution. Is this really that Esav is changing himself and a complete turnaround, or is this Esav being more of less sincere in his kiss? This is how Rashi quotes this source. If we go back to page 1, I printed here actually a Zohar, also, which when I was looking into this, I saw quoted, in which the Zohar, I'm not going to go through the whole Zohar, I printed about 4 or 5 lines here. The Zohar quotes other scenarios of kissing followed by crying. It's a very interesting thing that a kiss should be followed by a cry. We find here Yaakov and Esav kissing, Esav kissing Yaakov, and they cry. We find Yaakov kissing Rachel, VaYishlach Yaakov leRachel, VaYishlach Eskolo VaYeif, and again they cry. And the Midrash, the Zohar, is interested in why crying follows a kiss. And the Zohar says that a kiss is not a simple thing. The Zohar says a kiss is istabkusa, this is the top line of the Zohar, the last words, istabkusa zeruchaba. It's a joining, devek, as in like the modern Hebrew, glue, dovek means to join. It's a joining of the ruach, of the spirits. And Yaakov wasn't able to cope with the intensity of that experience, and therefore he cried. So we cry when we're overwhelmed by something. Unfortunately, more often than not, the overwhelming emotion is sadness, so we cry from sadness. But sometimes we can cry from joy. When we're overwhelmed with an emotion of joy, we can also cry. Here, Yaakov is overwhelmed by the experience of a kiss, because a kiss is a dveikus, a cleaving of the ruach, the spirit of a person. By the way, I'll mention this as an aside. The Rabbi Hacohen and others speak about the concept of crying, and they say crying is always when one's overwhelmed with emotion, such that one isn't able to see one's way forward. This has been such an abrupt about turn, such a revolution in my life. I don't know where I'm going with this. So if we talk about the process of bereavement and loss, so in the process of loss and bereavement, we thought we knew where things were going. I had this person who was part of my life, this relative, this friend. I pictured us, maybe naively, maybe foolishly so, because we know the way of the world, but I pictured ourselves walking through life, hand in hand, arm in arm, and suddenly this terrible loss has happened, and I just can't see my way forward. I just don't know where to go with it. Sometimes one can have a positive emotion. I thought my life would be plodding off to the factory every day, working on the conveyor belt, and I've just found out I've won the lottery. So I thought I knew where things were going, and now I don't know where it's going. Everything's an upheaval, everything's changed. So this is reflected physiologically by our tears blurring our eyes. We can't see our way through this. The Hebrew word for tears is dama'ot. Dama means blurring and confusion. That's the literal translation of dama. So it's a confusion. It's a blurring of our eyes. It's because we suffer a lack of clarity about which path we're going to go on to, where we're going to head. A happy emotion, like winning the lottery, the crying stops pretty quickly. Why? Because I very quickly adjust. Okay, I know where my life's going to go. I'm handing in my notice at the factory, and I'm going to now go and buy my mansion in on the Riviera, and I know what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. So I very quickly work out my new path forward. With a bereavement, the crying carries on because it takes me longer to work out my path forward. Eventually, though, we do. We find, what do we find? Actually, we find the Chama. The Chama is consolation. That's what we wish someone that they should find. The literal meaning on the Chama is change of direction. Meaning, I didn't want to go this way. I thought my path was going towards this way. Unfortunately, now my path is going to go a different way. I'm not going to have this person, but there's still a path in life. There's still good things that will happen. There's still opportunities to look forward to. It doesn't mean I cease mourning and missing the person I've lost. But I recognize that there's a path and a way forward, and I know where I'm going with that. So that's when the tears cease. That's the verse of Nechama. Nechama means redirection, literally. Condolence, consolation is actually in Hebrew, like the Nachum and the Kimenton. It means direction, finding a path forward. So here, why does Yaakov cry, for example, when he meets Rachel? Because of overwhelming emotion. There's in istabkusa to rucha. There's a dveikus, a merging of the ruchas. There's something very real happening when a kiss occurs. In the thoughts of the Zohar, it's a very interesting thing. Why do we express emotion with a kiss? So, our mouth can be used for eating, for tasting foods. It can be used for speaking, for language. It's used for breathing. Mouth has many functions. It's interesting that a mouth is also used for expressing love and emotion. And the Zohar understands the answer is because the mouth is where the ruach, the spirit, is found. It's where the breath, our inner, where that which is most ethereal about us, it goes out and comes back in, engages and disengages with the world. We have that which is more physical about us, which engages with the world, our hands, our feet, and everything else. But that which is most spiritual, our spirit, that which is the air within us that we bring in and exhale and inhale, is through the mouth. And therefore the ruach, the sort of innermost recesses of ourselves, expresses love and connection through a kiss. So we humans are holistic beings. We're made up of a sort of integrated sense. Our spiritual, our intellectual, our emotional, our physical, all works in correspondence. And therefore, the part of us which draws in the external world and exhales and interacts is the ruach, that which feels. When we experience our inner life ourselves, we feel that in our chest, in our heart, in our lungs, in our breathing. This is the part that engages in a kiss, expressing that this is an istabkus or derucha. This is a merging of spirit, of breath. It's almost a sort of what's it called when you breathe into a respiration. It's almost a respiration sort. It's a merging. It's istabkus or derucha. It's a merging of spirit. Says the Zohar that this is in general. However, in the case of Esav, this is a terrible kiss, because one can kiss in a fake way. If you kiss in a fake way, then it's a bifurcation of self. It's a tragedy. In the very last lines of the Zohar, and the penultimate line, man noshik b'chavivusa, someone who kisses with genuine love, mistabik rucha b'rucha, there's a merging of a cleaving of spirit to spirit. Dveikusa b'chavivusa, with the cleaving of love. Man zelo noshik b'chavivusa, but someone who kisses without love. It's a physicality, it's just a physical expression without love. The spirits don't cleave with that kiss, there's no merging at all. The Zohar says that this is a kiss in which the simplest meaning of the Zohar is this is a kiss in which there isn't a merging of spirits at all. So what we have here is a sequence of Midrashim, skeptical about Esav's kiss. One Midrash says, we would have assumed this was a fake kiss. The dots come and tell us it's real. It's a sad situation when you need to emphasize, don't take this, that this is real, don't take it as fake. And the other Midrash is even more extreme. Other Midrash says this is an shicha, this is a bite, not a kiss at all. And then we have Rashi and the Zohar, which perhaps take a more middle road. This is a kiss. Esav does engage in a kiss. That's the pshat. That's what the pasuk says. But nonetheless, this is an insincere kiss, and therefore we're not going to take it too seriously. This is how the Midrashim take these sources. Now, I'll stop there. There's Rabbi Zobin that also says a similar thing, but maybe just in the interest of time, we don't need to look at it. We'll maybe just look at the middle, page 2, very briefly. The Rabbi Zobin says, "VaYishlach you kissed him." This is really a summary. It's dotted on it. Wherever there's a dot above a letter, it's to mention, to draw our attention to something. The Kana Medcha here is teaching us so actually mirroring in a way the language of the Zohar. This isn't a kiss of the heart. This is a kiss of the nose. This is an external kiss, not a genuine kiss, and it's not, as Rashi said, b'chol libo. Okay, so this is the Midrashic reading of the Psukim. What are we meant to make of all of this? And what's going on over here about these two kisses that are occurring? What really happened actually? Which kiss was this? Did Esav try to bite Yaakov? What does it mean that Yaakov's neck turned into marble? When did it turn back into a regular neck? How does the Midrash know that it turns into marble? Where does the Midrash see this in the Psukim? So what are we meant to make of all these sources? So to answer this question, I'm really going to share a thought from a couple of the Chassidic thinkers who write about these matters. And this is a nice case study in how to learn a Midrash. But to do that, we're going to first look at a very famous sequence of psukim from the beginning of the Sedra. VaYishlach Yaakov, so this is the middle of page 2, a chapter earlier than the one we just saw. VaYishlach Yaakov Einav, Yaakov lifts up his eyes, Vaya, and he sees V'nei Esav ba, Esav is coming, V'ima Arba Me'os ish, and with him are 400 people. So this is the psukim of Yaakov encountering these dangerous. So I misprinted it. The psukim. I'm sorry. There's possibly the wrong one. The Hebrew there is mistaken. It should be the psukim of Tefillah. But let's go on to pasuk Yud Beis, pasuk 12. The Hebrew there doesn't match the English. Hatzileni na. Yaakov says, "Save me, miyad ochi miyad Esav, from the hands of my brother, from my hands of Esav. Ki yorei anochi, because I'm afraid. Pen yavo vekani emal bonim, lest he comes and smites me, the mother with the children." So Yaakov here is turning to Hashem. and he's davening to Hashem. I apologize for the typo in Pasuk Yud, but the sense here is clear. Yaakov is davening to Hashem, and he says, "Save me, Hatzileni na, please save me, miyad ochi, miyad Esav, from the hands of my brother, from the hands of Esav." Now, the Mefarshim all are troubled by this language. What does it mean, save me from the hands of my brother, from the hands of Esav? We know who Esav is by now. If we haven't learned by now who Esav is, then what's going on over here? Certainly, Yaakov is speaking to Hashem. Hashem knows who Esav is, right? Why is Yaakov saying, save me from my brother, save me from Esav? So Rashi comments on this, and Rashi says, save me from my brother, save me from Esav. For my brother who doesn't behave to me like a brother, but rather like Esav the wicked. So Yaakov is sort of emphasizing the fear and the terrible wickedness of Esav. I'm not davening to be saved from an enemy, from a member of a distant people, from an ancient enemy of our faith, or whatever it may be. I'm davening to save from my brother from Esav. What a terrible situation to be in, that my brother is attacking me like this. What a truly awful man he is. And I really need your help, Hashem. This is how Rashi reads this double layer of psukim. The Aryeh on the Parsha gives a number of explanations, one of which has become very famous and which is the one I'm interested in. But let's just have a look at the Aryeh. The Aryeh is in the top of page 3. And the Aryeh says, Miyad Achi, the Aryeh is Reb Chaim ibn Attar. We're talking about a North African commentary, early 1700s, contemporary, by the way, of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Chassidus. And it's very, very interesting. We have letters from those who were close to the Baal Shem Tov, in which he talks about communication, in which these two figures engaged in, even though they were continents apart. The Aryeh was North Africa, then Eretz Israel. Baal Shem Tov was in East Europe, and they had some sort of encounter in visions and dreams or the like. Again, we don't know exactly what to make of these things, but this is recorded. The Baal Shem Tov had a brother-in-law who moved to Eretz Israel. In those days, that was many months of difficult travel to get there via the Black Sea port of Odessa and so on, and eventually landed up in Eretz Israel. And we have preserved letters that the Baal Shem Tov wrote to this brother-in-law, and there are records of communication, oral communication, in which it seems the Baal Shem Tov and Aryeh are somehow aware of each other as fellow mystics who lived in different parts of the Jewish world, who were engaged in some form of similar mystical pursuit. The Aryeh has become then, therefore, almost an honorary Chassidic thinker. This wasn't, when I referenced this, I did not mean this when I said a Chassidic source. I wouldn't be so historically inaccurate, but the Chassidim learned the Aryeh a lot, and he's referred to as the Aryeh HaKadosh. The Aryeh deals with this discrepancy, miyad ochi, miyad Esav, this tautology, this double use of language, and he quotes Rashi, and he disagrees with it, and he says that he gives a number of explanations in which he says this isn't about Yaakov emphasizing, even though he's my brother, he's the terrible Esav, but this is about Yaakov emphasizing two aspects of Esav. And the first explanation he gives is, he says we have to realize that Esav is a powerful figure. He's not a regular person. Number one, he's Achi, he's my brother. He's a descendant of the heritage of the Ovos. He's a descendant of Avraham and Yitzchak. He's not a run-of-the-mill person. He has the chus Ovos, a very remarkable idea. He has the merit of his ancestors. In other words, in some way or other, he still connects to his heritage, and therefore I'm afraid of him because I'm encountering someone who comes from the same stock as me. He's my brother. He's also an heir to the tradition of the Ovos, and therefore I'm afraid of him because he has the merit and the zechus of Yitzchak. Equally, Miyad Esav, he's also Esav. He's also his own powerful figure in his own right. And the Aryeh says that that Esav as a powerful figure, he's a man of force and a person of quality. Unfortunately, not necessarily someone who uses his qualities in a good direction. He's developed his qualities in the path of evilness, but nonetheless, he's Esav. He's someone who is a strong figure. He isn't a mere opponent, and therefore, this is the double expression of Miyad Achi, Miyad Esav. But then the Aryeh says another explanation, and he says the double expression of Miyad Achi, Miyad Esav is, I'm afraid, which mode he might meet me in. And here we're going to have a look in the penultimate paragraph in the Aryeh. The Aryeh is the top of page 3, the penultimate paragraph. Another explanation of the pasuk is this way: Hatzileni no miyadach, he saved me from my brother. Imischakim olav laharab ramos achva. If he's clever or cunning to do me evil through a pretense of brotherhood, shuderech in Yaakov yochel I can't save myself. Please save me from that. Miyad Esav. And similarly, in your fasting rishur lahara, if he'll be blatant and open and transparent about his desire to be evil, I also need prayer to help me from that. So Aryeh says, save me from my brother, save me from Esav, whichever mode he's in. If he decides to fake brotherliness and pretend to be a friend of mine and treat me with love, save me from that. And if he decides to be open and apparent that he's in Esav mode and he's out to get me and kill me and be violent towards me, save me from that also. So this is the second reading of the Aryeh. Hatzileni no miyad achim miyad Esav. Save me from my brother if he's operating in fake brotherly mode. Save me from Esav if he's operating in open, transparent, violent mode. These are the two. This is the double tefillah that Yaakov makes. Now the Aryeh understands the ochi, the brother mode, as a fake brotherliness. Really, he's going to stab me in the back as he gives me the hug. He's going to fake friendship as a way of getting onto my radar, reducing my defenses, perhaps of looking good in the eyes of the world. But this is going to be a fake friendship. Later Chassidic thinkers take this idea further, and they say Yaakov's even worried about genuine friendship of Esav and what effect that could have on him. So in their reading, the double expression of save me from the hands of Esav, from the hands of my brother, from the hands of Esav, means save me from the hands of my brother if he genuinely is in a brotherly mode, because that's also dangerous for me. Hatzileni miyad Esav, or save me if he's in a violent mode. And the first idea I want to share is from the Sfas Emes. And the Sfas Emes says that famously, a very, very classic Chassidic idea, he says famously Yaakov prepares for the encounter in three ways. If we look at the Pesukim, he prepares for the encounter in three ways. He tries to appease Esav by giving him presents. He tries to prepare for war by splitting his camp if it's going to get violent, and he davens to Hashem. And if you look at the Pesukim, you see these three preparations, and the Gemara identifies these as three ways of preparing, and takes from this a general rule about how we ought to deal with encounters with those who threaten us. Good advice, really. Try and appease, try and prepare if you do have to fight, how to deal with it, and daven to Hashem. Those are the three paths that we should encounter. This is what the Chazal draw out of this encounter between Yaakov and Esav. The Sfas Emes says that Esav prepares in turn three methods of blocking Yaakov's attempts. And he labels this as zer l'umas zer, this paralleling this, which is code words for a Chassidic and Kabbalah idea that whatever the forces of Kedusha have, whatever the forces of holiness have, the forces of evil have in parallel. So there's always an equilibrium between the forces of evil and forces of Kedusha, and we have to choose which path we follow. So he says there's a zer l'umas zer. Esav, tragically and sadly, chooses to equip himself with an evil, a negative response to Yaakov's three methods. And he says, what is the response of Esav to Yaakov's attempt to daven? Brotherliness, friendship. Because if you can draw Yaakov into a connection and you can engage him in a genuine way of relating, he will suck Yaakov somewhat into his worldview. What is Esav's worldview? A materialistic worldview, a worldview that denies transcendence, that doesn't engage with it, that actually believes that everything is preordained and deterministic. Esav's name is Osoim, that which is made. Yaakov's name is Akev, the heel, the path. Yaakov lives a life of movement, of motion. It's the journey that matters. Esav is already also everything is the way it is, and it's just unfolding of that which is already inherent in it. There isn't room for creativity, for change, for human free will. There isn't space for tefillah, for prayer, which is predicated on the assumption that we humans can transcend that which is preordained and change the situation. So Esav wants to suck Yaakov into a relationship. The Sfas Emes puns the language of the Zohar, and I don't think he actually quotes the Zohar, but it's clear once one's seen the Zohar what the Sfas Emes is doing. And the Sfas Emes says this is an istabkusa to ruchos. This is a merging of spirits, because that's exactly what Esav wants to achieve when he gives him this kiss. He wants that connection with him because he really wants to impact on Yaakov and alter how Yaakov operates and how he engages with the world in order to blunt the force of Yaakov's power of tefillah. So he says this is Zeh L'Omar neged Sitra de Kedusha, against the Sitra of Kedusha. Again, using the language of the Mekabalim, there's the Sitra Acha, there's the negative side, and there's the Sitra of Kedusha, there's the positive side, and Esav here is engaging with Yaakov. I'm trying to take this just out of the mystical into the realm that we can relate to. He's trying to blunt the force of Yaakov's tefillah. He links this to the encounter that Yaakov has, the very mysterious encounter Yaakov has with the sorrowful Esav, with the Sar is the angelic prince of Esav. We don't know exactly what these ideas mean, but the concept that every people have a Sar, a prince, means that every nation, every people, every person to a degree has a spiritual root. We draw our spiritual energy from somewhere. We have a spiritual potential. Yaakov wrestles with the sorrowful Esav, with the spiritual force of Esav. The language again is of the Midrash is Vaye'ovik. The pasuk says Vaye'ovik Ishma. He wrestles with him. The language of Vaye'ovik is to do with dust. When you wrestle, dust rises up. There's a cloud of dust around people who are wrestling. What happens to this dust? Says the Midrash, this goes all the way to the Kislev. This reaches the throne of glory. It reaches the highest spiritual realms. In other words, this is a spiritual and physical battle that's intertwined, that's going on at the same time. The pasuk says that when Yaakov wins the battle, he's renamed Yisrael. Because he battled heavenly forces and earthly forces, and you triumphed in both of those. So what's happened here? This is a battle of the forces, and part of this battle is Esav behaving in achi mode, in brotherly mode, and trying genuinely to connect with Yaakov, but with an intention, with an agenda. He says, Yaakov, come and join me. Let's genuinely kiss. Let's have an istapkus of because he wants to blunt Yaakov's tefillah mode in which he's operating, in which he's existing. So says the Tzfas Emes. The final source I want to look at is the Shem Mishmuel, the final source of the Chassidic thinkers, and then we'll see a couple of other thinkers. Who starts off at the beginning. This is at the bottom, the second final source on page 3. In the first paragraph, he quotes off. He starts quoting these Midrashim, and then in a very typical move, he asks two questions. His first question is, he says, "I want to know why the Midrash says that Yaakov's neck changed to shayish, to marble." I mean, marble is the metaphor always used for the hardest of stones, but there's other materials you can use to indicate a neck becoming hard so that it can't be bitten. And in fact, he quotes several pasukim where when the pasuk wants to talk about that which is hard, he uses barzul, iron, as its material which is hard. These are pasukim that we know, they should be bronze, and the land underneath you will be like iron. This is in the Tochacha describing the harshness of the natural conditions if we are cursed. We've often find the hard metals used to describe that which is hard. So why is the language of shayish used over here? The second point he asks is, he says, well, what's going on over here? What really happened? Did they kiss or did he try and bite? And what's the Midrash doing when it says he tried to bite? I mean, that's not what the pasuk says. A Midrash can uncover a layer of meaning, but it can't create new meaning. Well, what's strange reading the pasuk? He tried to bite, but as he puts his lips over the neck to bite in a vampire-like manner, the neck hardens like marble, and he finds himself there with his broken teeth and his lips pressing against the neck of Yaakov, and this is a kiss. Which one happens? And then he says, we have a tradition that whenever we have alternative readings of a pasuk, alternative understandings, they both reflect the truth. So they're just talking about the same truth from different angles. What's going on over here? Which is the truth that happens? Says the Nefesh, says the Shem Mishmuel. Let's look at the last two paragraphs on page 3. V'nira, in the main argument of Boile Nashro, if he came to bite him, but if genuinely his mercy was aroused at that time, and he wholeheartedly kissed him. That they are both the words of the living God. And now we'll get to the final paragraph, in which he says, the Mefarshim explain that Yaakov is afraid of miyad achi, miyad Esav. He's afraid of these two modes of Esav. And therefore he says that both are happening at the same time. Esav is a complicated and nuanced character. He is giving him a kiss, but that kiss is the bite. This is the same thing happening at the same time. The Midrash isn't talking here about a literal bite, it's talking about figurative bite. The kiss of Esav is a bite. Esav genuinely feels for a moment mercy on Yaakov. He genuinely wants to engage with Yaakov. He genuinely wants to kiss and connect him. But that kiss is a poisonous kiss. It's a dangerous kiss. It's a vampire's kiss. It's a kiss that will harm Yaakov, because if Yaakov is drawn into a relationship with Esav, it will ultimately blunt the edge of Yaakov's spiritual intensity, and he'll be sucked into Esav's materialistic world view. And this will end up with being a poisonous bite, which injects into Yaakov the zuama, the tumma, the poison of the impurity that is unfortunately the life that Esav has chosen. And he says, therefore, this is the metaphor of stone. He first of all uses a halachic source to explain this. He says stone is a metal and stone are both hard. Metal, however, can be molded. It's malleable. It can be melted and it can be formed into a shape for human use. This is the reason, he says, why halachically metal can be makabel tumah. Metal can become impurified, because we human beings can master metal and form it and mold it into utensils, and these utensils can be makabel tumah. A metal utensil which comes in contact with someone who is tomei, with a source of ritual impurity, picks up that ritual impurity, it also becomes tomei. A stone utensil can't become that, because stone is never our servant. So we can shape stone into the way we want to, we can cut stone, but we can't mold stone, we can't reform it. It's always us taking that which is created and pre-given and ultimately above human existence, and therefore stone is never makabel tumah in halacha. Stone can't receive this ritual impurity. And therefore he says this is the metaphor of the shayish that Yaakov's neck is being turned into. It becomes immune to the impurity that Esav is trying to inject in it. His kiss, which is a bite, is responded to by shayish, by marble, immune and above the tumah of of Esav's attempt. I want to add to this, I think it's no coincidence that it's his neck that turns into stone. The neck is the bridge between the body and the mind. It's the interface, the connector between these two aspects of us human being. The neck is, of course, the source of the ruach, of the spirit, that to which we breathe in and out. So if what's going on here is an attempt of Esav to bifurcate Yaakov, to disconnect between the mind and the emotion, it's an attempt of Esav to create a merging of ruach, of the spirits of the two, and connect in this way. The neck is the great connector. The neck, by the way, is of course the source of our ability to bring that which is material into ourselves. It's the source of our ability to express ideas outwards, to speak. Speech is the interface between that which is inside us and that which is outside us, and therefore the neck is the part of Yaakov which is in danger from the attempt of Esav to form a genuine kiss. A kiss, as the Zohar explains, is a merging of the ruach, of the spirit. Yaakov's neck, therefore, is that which turns into shayish, which is that which becomes marble, and therefore is immune from the connection that Esav wants to make. So these are the various sources in understanding these midrashim, and in the beautiful start of the Shem Shmuel, a source which looks at both readings of the Midrash and says that both these readings are true. There's a kiss which is a bite. I want to finish off though with two non-Chassidic sources which take these pasukim in a Peshat level. They're not unaware of the complexities of what an Esav is, but they read the story we've read so far to some degree or other has a pessimism around it. It's a painful reading of the pasukim. Esav's kiss is sincere, but unfortunately, even when his kiss is sincere, it's a kiss that needs to be avoided. It's a bear's embrace. It's not a safe hug for us to have. Either there's no istabkusa derucha, there's no genuine merging of the spirits, because it's fake. It's an attempt to bite. It's not wholehearted. And even if it is wholehearted, the tragedy of the relationship between Yaakov and Esav is that Esav has chosen to set himself on a path where Yaakov can never meet. Two non-Chassidic thinkers, though, don't look at it this way. And they look at the next word, vayivku. They cry. Yaakov cries. Not just Esav cries, but they cry, both cry. They're both overwhelmed with emotion. And therefore, there's something going on honest over here. How much of this is honest, we don't know. We've seen the Midrash. Esav's not the most reputable character. There's a lot about him that's fake. There's a lot about him that's dishonest. There's a lot of ulterior motives going on in his relationships. But there's also some drop of sincerity here. Otherwise, they can't cry. And have a look at the beautiful words of Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch on page 4 over here. And he says, a pure human emotion emanated from the heart of Esav. The evidence of this is that he wept. See, there's a spelling mistake here, forgive me. Flattery, fakeness can lead to a kiss, but not to tears. He says tears burst out at such moments. Then in a Hirschian move, he engages in a bit of etymology, and he says the word bocha for crying is close to boka, that which bursts thoughts, or poka, or pikeach, pokach, that which cracks and bursts open. Tears that come from the depths of the human soul. So he says when crying is happening, the Torah is telling us something real is happening. And there's no dots over the VaYivka. There may be dots over the kissing, but there's no dots over the crying. They're both crying. VaYivka, they're both crying. This kiss and these tears also show Esav as the son of Avraham. And then he says it's inconceivable that Esav was only a savage hunter. For how was he able to direct the whole development of mankind? Esav, after all, is the source of, we ascribe Esav as the ancestor of Rome, ultimately the ancestor of Western civilization. Look at what the West has achieved. I mean, this is Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch writing in 1800s in pre-Holocaust Germany, when there's still an optimism and about the West. But even post those terrible events, we're maybe not as optimistic as Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch is about it. But look at what an Esav has achieved. He says it's inconceivable that Esav was only a savage hunter. He says the unsheathed swords, raw force alone, cannot do this. The achievements of Esav can't be achieved just through violence. But even Esav will gradually get the sword out of his hands. Bit by bit, he will give way to humanity. Precisely towards Yaakov, he will be given an opportunity to show to what degree the doctrine of humanity prevails in his heart. And then he finishes off and he says, when the strong respect the rights of the strong, that's cleverness, that's just wisdom. But when the strong respect the rights of the weak, like Esav here, who falls on the neck of the weak and casts aside the source of suggestion, then justice and humanity is being revealed in the heart. So he sees something genuine over here. And he says the relationship between an Esav and Yaakov is the relationship between the strong and the weak. This is shades of ideas I shared, I think, a couple of weeks ago from Facts around anti-Semitism, which says anti-Semitism is the ability of a society to tolerate the other, to tolerate the Jew, to tolerate a difference in it, to give the dignity of difference to a weak, to those who are strangers, is the measure of the worth of a society. A society that can't cope with someone who's different is a society that's doomed to failure. It's going to tear itself apart. The measure of an Esav is respecting the strong. No, fine. I mean, that's clever. There's no greatness in it. But the ability of an Esav to respect the weak, that's the source of optimism. And there's a moment here, Esav cast away his sword, and we have to respect that. We have to see that. We have to recognize that. He cast away his sword, and there's a moment of truth and genuine connection. By Yivku, there's a moment of crying and recognition. So says Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch. His near contemporary, the Netziv, the Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin in Eastern Europe, the Rosh Hashiva of Volozhin, wrote a sefer commentary on the Torah that I've discussed many times before in this forum, called the Hamek Dova. And he says a similar idea. Vayivku, they wept, Shnei and Bachu, they both crept. He says to teach us that at that moment, Yaakov also feels an ahava back to Esav. He also feels a love back to Esav. And unlike the Chassidic sources we see, he doesn't see a danger in that. He says this is a wholly appropriate response. And he says throughout the generations, there will be times when Esav is inspired with a pure spirit to engage with us positively and to respect and to be able to respect empathetically respect the Jewish people. And at such a point, we need in turn to love it back and respect that Esav, after all, is Achidu, he is our brother. And he brings examples of history, like Rebbe, who had a genuine love for Antoninus, the Roman emperor or Roman consul at the time, and there was a genuine love and respect, because Antoninus was a figure from Esav who genuinely respected and loved the Jewish people in turn. And therefore his concluding words, in a sense even more powerful than Hirsch, isn't just that Esav is genuine, at least a spark of genuineness in this, but Yaakov had to respond to that and was correct to respond to that. It was right that he responded to it. And throughout history, we need to recognize moments when original aspiration is restored, in which Esav genuinely behaves like a brother, and then we need to recognize that brotherliness and respond in turn with love. This is the Hamek Dova's thoughts on this Parsha. Very different reading in the Psukim. I would suggest, in line with the Shem Shmuel, that we need to say, there's times when we shouldn't respond to the fake or dangerous kiss, and we need to harden our necks, our ruach, like marble. And there's times when we absolutely do need to respond, and we need to recognize the shared brotherliness that we all ultimately are Bnei Avraham and Bnei Yitzchak, and therefore work together with the genuine response of love. So I'm not sure there's really a contradiction between these ideas, but certainly a different emphasis. And I'll conclude there and wish everyone a good evening. And again, this shiur was in Nishmas Tamma Basvi Aryeh Hacohen, whose Yahrzeit is tonight. Thank you so much for sponsoring it. Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, someone's just asking live, and then I'll come to you also. Just give me 1 second. Yes, sorry.
It is perhaps reflected in the two approaches in the modern in the Orthodox Jewish world, out of the Haredi approach, which is very, very suspicious of Esav and the outside world, and perhaps the other approach, which we will subscribe to try to encounter them. It's kind of an ongoing.
It is an ongoing. Look, they're emphasizing clearly these are different thinkers, and Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch and the Hamak Dava are choosing to emphasize one part of the story. The Shemesh Shmuel is choosing to emphasize Emerson on a different part of the story. But again, what the Midrash is really telling us is that both parts are true. Esav's a complex character. There's a degree that the resolution of the Midrash in this reading isn't two alternative readings. It's that both are true. There's a degree to which his kiss is genuine, a degree to which isn't. And you're right, I mean, different communities choose to emphasize different halves. But I would argue we all actually need both parts. If we're drawn towards the embrace, we need to also remember the caution. And if we're drawn to caution, we need to also remember sincerity and genuineness. And we probably need relationships are complicated. And if any relationship was fraught with challenge, it was the Esav Yaakov relationship. In some degree, we still grapple what is our place as Yaakov in an Esav world. How do we preserve our spirituality and our connection and not lose it, and at the same time be able to connect to what Rav Hirsch says of the real achievements of Esav in the development of humanity. Sorry, Terry.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I've always had this battle with about Esav, because I feel that he was, we point him as bad and good, and he's bad, and I've always struggled with that, with the stealing of the birthright. Now, you mentioned about crying, that he was, if you're sincere when you're crying, didn't he cry about the birthright, that he'd lost the birthright? He
did, and by the way, and this is pointed out by the Mefarshim, you're absolutely right to struggle. There's no Parsha in the Torah in which raw emotions are so displayed as that of the interactions between Esav and Yitzchak. The Torah normally is very, very sparse in its language, and it leaves a lot of sort of character development and nuance unsaid. We're told very little about the inner lives of characters in the Torah. One of the few cases where the Torah, and it's deliberate, goes out of the way to arouse empathy is towards Esav. It's very, very interesting. And the pain is very clear that it's real and sincere pain being described when Esav cries and suffers over the loss of the Bechorah. He feels he was deceived, his birthright is stolen, his bracha is stolen. VaYishlach Yitzchak in turn is in pain. And the tragedy of Esav is his sort of the genuineness of his pain, and yet also his lack of self-awareness. He sold it, he gave it away, he disregarded it. And you picture this vibrant, alive, energetic, impulsive character who loses that which he recognizes as precious in one moment and then despairs and regrets it afterwards and struggles to sort of balance his impulsivity with he's torn into two. There's two parts of him at work, and the Midrash is reading in these two dots to the same two aspects of Esav coming out. So I don't think we're meant to just read the Esav story as I think he's struggling, and it's interesting actually. The same two figures we mentioned previously, the Hamak Dava and Rav Hirsch, both are somewhat critical of Yitzchak's chinuch that he gave to Esav, and both actually, and Moses, but both these two figures suggest that had Yitzchak and Rivka dealt differently with Esav, maybe Esav could have turned out differently. He's a very different character to Yaakov. He's not someone who easily fits into the house of the Avos, and yet maybe things could have turned out differently. And we sort of live, in a sense, the whole of Jewish history is lived through that pain of, we could have had this wonderful partnership with Esav, and we don't have it. And could we get, can we ever get back to that sort of relationship again? That's sort of a running theme through these parshas. So yeah. Esav is a bad man, a very bad man, a deeply and profoundly wicked person who stands for everything the Torah doesn't like. But that doesn't mean we can't recognize how hard it is for him, and that even bad people have nuances and feelings and kind of moments of correction and genuine love in their lives. Okay, thank you. So we'll stop here, and I wish everyone good night. Thank you so much for joining.